Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vinda. Hare Krishna. So, today we're remembering the disappearance of Sri Isvara Puri, the spiritual master of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Of course, nobody is the spiritual master of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but he allows that so that we can understand the importance of the spiritual master. And we'll speak a little more about that. So I'll begin by reading one verse from Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, chapter 9, text number 11. Sri Isvara Puri Rupe Ankura Pushtahaila Apane Chaitanya Mali Skanda Upajila. Not there? It's coming just now? Just now coming. Shri Isvara Puri Rupe Ankura Pushtahaila Rupe Apane Chaitanya Mali Skanda Upajila. Shri Isvara Puri Rupe Ankura Pushtahaila Apane Chaitanya Mali Skanda Upajila. Isvara Puri Rupe Ankura Pushtahaila Apane Chaitanya Mali Skanda Upajila. Shri Isvara Puri Rupe Ankura Pushtahaila Apane Chaitanya Mali Skanda Upajila. Shri Isvara Puri Rupe Ankura Pushtahaila Apane Chaitanya Mali Skanda Upajila. Shri Isvara Puri Rupe Ankura Pushtahaila Vaishnavis. Ishvara Puri Rupe Ankura Pushtahaila Apane Chaitanya Mali Skanda Upajila. Shri Isvara Puri Rupe Ankura Pushtahaila Apane Chaitanya Mali Skanda Upajila. Shri Isvara Puri Rupe Ankura Pushtahaila Apane Chaitanya Mali Skanda Upajila. Sri Isvara Puri, by the name Sri Isvara Puri. Rupe, in the form of Ankura, the seed, Pushta, cultivated, Haila, became, Apane, himself, Chaitanya Mali, the gardener of the name Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. skanda, trunk, upajila, expanded. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. The seed of devotional service next fructified in the form of Sri Isvara Puri, and then the gardener himself, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, became the main trunk of the tree of devotional service. So everyone can please repeat. The seed of devotional service next fructified in the form of Sri Isvara Puri. And then the gardener himself, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, became the main trunk of the tree of devotional service. Purports. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur writes in his Anubhasya, Sri Isvara Puri was a resident of Kumarahatta, where there is now a railroad station known as Kamarhatta. Nearby there is another station named Halisihara, which belongs to the Eastern Railway. This railway runs from the east section of Calcutta. Om Jnana-timirandasya gananjana sharakaya chakshurum militam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakada Mahyam Tadati Swaparantikam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyate Deshatarine Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So I stopped here because someone may wonder why all these railway stations mentioned in Shastra. But actually, the reason that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur mentioned this was so that people could go to these holy places, and get purified. And actually, the first time I went on tour, especially of South India and Bengal, I used the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Unfortunately, many names had changed, and we ended up taking a lot of wrong trains or getting off at the wrong place. But it was interesting in any case. Isvara Puri appeared in a Brahman family and was the most beloved disciple of Srila Madhavendra Puri. In the last portion of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Anta 8:28-31, it is stated, Isvara Puri Gosane Kari Sripada Sevana Swahaste Karena Mala Mutradi Marjana Nirantara Krishna Nama Karya Smaran Krishna Nama Krishna Lila Shunaya Anukshana Tushtahana Puri Tange Kaila Alingara Badidila Krishna Tomara Hauka Premadhana Se Haiti Ishvara Puri Premera Sagara. At the last stage of his life, Sri Madhavendra Puri became an invalid and was completely unable to move. And Isvara Puri so completely engaged himself in his service that he personally cleaned up his stool and urine. Who also did that? For whom? Okay, good. Always chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and reminding Sri Isvara Puri about the pastimes of Lord Krishna in the last stage of his life, Isvara Puri gave the best service among his disciples. Thus Madhavendra Puri, being very pleased with him, blessed him, saying, My dear boy, I can only pray to Krishna that he will be pleased with you. Thus, Isvara Puri, by the grace of his spiritual master, Sri Madhavendra Puri, became a great devotee in the ocean of love of Godhead. So, this is a very famous moment. Sri Madhavendra Puri is the first person, even before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that's why it mentions him as part of the trunk of the transcendental tree of devotional service. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the trunk, but the seed of that trunk of that is Sri Madhavendra Puri, and then the seed fructifies in the form of Isvara Puri, and then the trunk sprouts from there. So this is a famous pastime, and nowadays, if someone is elderly and it says completely unable to move, or even much before that, people put them in an ancient person's asylum because they will interfere with sense gratification. No. This is becoming more and more popular. Still in India and some other places, Latin America, China, there's respect for the elders. But in the West, it's more or less old and gray and in the way. So, otherwise, not so much interested. No. Interfere. Even children sometimes interfere with work. After the during the COVID, I remember I saw an article, and one person writing the article said, women are greatly in distress because they're having to take care of their children. What a horrible thing. They can't send them to daycare. So, so this is an unfortunate thing. But here we see the love of Isvara Puri, that he was very happy to Madhavendra Puri's pastime. Madhavendra Puri is so transcendental that when he went to Govardhan, Krishna personally came to serve him. So how can he be an invalid? Such a great personality. Because the body. But even his transcendental body, anyone on the level of Madhavendra Puri could give up their body at will, just like Bhishma, so many great yogis, they could give up. He could do that. But this was his pastime, to show what it means to be a faithful disciple, that you are willing to do anything and everything for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotee. The devotee is so dear to Krishna that Krishna personally serves the devotee. So this he cleaned. Then he would recite the pastimes of Krishna Lila to Madhavendra Puri. Because Madhavendra Puri, he wasn't reciting it because he may forget, or he might not be thinking of Krishna at the time of death. He recited these pastimes to give pleasure, thinking that my spiritual master is suffering so much from the difficulties given by this body. No. Let me enthuse him. Just like those who chant the Gayatri mantra, they say prachodaya. No. That I want to enthuse. No. I want to enthuse Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Guru, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Radha and Krishna. No. We enthuse them by engaging in their service. And they are not enthused because we're serving them, because we are showing the necessary ingredient for exchange of loving devotional service, which means that when the devotee offers service without any personal expectation, then the Lord will reciprocate, even more than the devotee can do. Because the Lord can give more than the devotee. Although sometimes the Lord feels that the devotee has conquered him. Yat prayasho jita chitopyasi taistrilokyam. Lord Brahma said that that although the Lord cannot be conquered anywhere within the three worlds, he is conquered by the love of his devotee. So, in this pastime, Madhavendra Puri got blessed, got a special blessing. It says that he achieved love of Godhead, but actually he had already achieved love of God. But he was given love of Godhead by Madhavendra Puri. Pure devotees, they take like Arjuna, like so many, they take a apparent position of not being fully developed in their devotional service. And then this allows others to see how to develop loving devotional sentiments to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, and then there's another verse after this that says that Maharanugraha Nigrahera Shakshi Twijane, that these two persons, the other person was Ramachandra Puri. So Isvara Puri was serving Madhavendra Puri so wonderfully, and just before, a little bit before, Isvara Puri was so humble, and actually Ramachandra Puri was senior godbrother. So he was coming and saying, "Why are you crying? You should be meditating on Brahman," instructing his spiritual master. So Madhavendra Puri said, "Take him away from here. I don't want to see his face when I leave my body. Otherwise, what will be my destination?" So it says that these two persons, one Anugraha, he got the supreme benediction, and the other Nigraha, he got the opposite. So, Dvij Dware Shikaila Jagajane. So it says that these two showed two things to the whole world, what it means to be two pathways, either to be a servant of the Lord or to be opposed to the Lord, by this pastime. So, Srila Prabhupada continues. Sri Madhavendra Puri became, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur states in his Guru Vastakam prayer, Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado yasya prasadan nagati kutopi. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one is blessed by the mercy of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. It is by the mercy of the spiritual master that one becomes perfect, as vividly exemplified here. A Vaishnava is always protected by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But if he appears to be an invalid, this gives a chance to his disciples to serve him. Just like Srila Prabhupada, Krishna reigns, that the devotees could serve Srila Prabhupada. Actually, Srila Prabhupada wanted all of his disciples to come to Vrindavan. He wrote a letter. But one of the people in charge of book distribution decided that if we show that letter, book distribution will stop. So he hid the letter. And only a few people had seen it. Actually, Prabhupada wanted all of his disciples to come. He said that. Later, that letter got found, and the person who hid it had some difficulties in their devotional life. The point is that you can never calculate by one's own meager intelligence what is the desire of the spiritual master. One has to be surrendered. Not by some intellectual ability can we understand. Isvara Puri pleased his spiritual master by service, and by the blessings of his spiritual master, he became such a great personality that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted him as spiritual master. So, how elevated can he be? That Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chose him, just like he chooses devotees to come and be relatives, friends, who are great devotees, or some of them are eternally in that position. Just like Nanda Maharaj, Yashoda Mai, Vasudev, Devaki, they are all Jagannath Mishra, Shachi Mata, they are all eternally in that position. And some other devotees are put in that position for the Lord's pastime. Sri Isvara Puri was the spiritual master of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But before initiating Lord Chaitanya, he went to Navadvip and lived for a few months in the house of Gopinath Acharya. At that time, Lord Chaitanya became acquainted with him, and it is understood that he served Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by reciting his book, Krishna Lilamrita. This is explained in Sri Chaitanya Bhagavat, Adi Kanda, chapter 11. So, Isvara Puri was wandering around near Navadvip, and then he came to Shantipur. Wandering around means that devotees who are fixed in ecstatic love for Krishna, they cannot stay in one place. That doesn't mean that everybody that doesn't stay in one place is in ecstatic love for Krishna. It means some people cannot stay in one place because of the mode of passion. But these devotees, very special devotees, just like Srila Prabhupada, his ecstatic emotion was feeling compassion for the fallen conditioned soul. And therefore, he went everywhere. It seemed like this was his plan, but this was actually his ecstasy, feeling the ecstasy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Therefore, when Srila Prabhupada in Caracas, Venezuela, in Atlanta, Georgia, USA, and a few other places, he went into ecstasy. In Caracas, for like 5 minutes, he was in ecstasy, tears coming from his eyes, flowing from his eyes, because he just chanted that Nitai, and that's all he could do. And he was feeling so much compassion. Devotees, finally they started chanting Hare Krishna. He came out, and in Atlanta, all the Sankirtan devotees had come for this big festival to be with Srila Prabhupada. All Sankirtan devotees from all over the USA. And Prabhupada began to sing, and he saw all these devotees. He went into such deep ecstasy that afterwards he just said, chant Hare Krishna. All he could do. So Prabhupada had to constantly contain this ecstasy. But this is a very special type of ecstasy, that feeling, this compassion, because Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his mood is audarya, to give mercy. And therefore, when that audarya is overflowing, when madhurya overflows, it becomes audarya. And therefore, such an intense feeling of love for Krishna and the desire to please Krishna by bringing everyone to his lotus feet. So, Madhavendra Puri, he disguised himself, meaning he didn't dress. Although he was a sannyasi, he didn't dress. He came to Shantipur because he wanted to meet Advaitacharya. But he didn't want people to bow down, or, so just like also Pundarik Vidyanidhi, when he came to Navadvip, he also disguised himself. Very nice hair, silk dress, and like a wealthy person. And everybody thought, oh, just a puffed up wealthy person. So that way nobody would bow down. So, but when Advaitacharya saw him, he said, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments that a pure Vaishnava cannot be concealed from another pure Vaishnava. Although sometimes the Lord can be concealed, but a pure Vaishnava can never be concealed. So they may be concealed from our vision because we have material desire. But someone who has a pure heart, they can immediately detect a pure devotee. And so Advaita Acharya said, "Oh, I can understand. You are a great sannyasi." And Isvara Puri said, "I am simply the lowest of all Shudras, but I have come here to get darshan of your lotus feet." And so Advaita Acharya, he wanted to glorify him. So he looked at Mukunda, and Mukunda began to recite your verses about Krishna. And immediately, Isvara Puri went into ecstasy and fell to the ground. And then he recited more verses, and his ecstasy increased more and more, and tears were shooting from his eyes. And Advaita Acharya picked him up, and so many tears were coming from his eyes that Advaita Acharya was drenched. His clothing was drenched with the tears from Isvara Puri. And then they began to speak about Krishna for some time, and of course then they both glorified Madhavendra Puri, and then Isvara Puri went to Navadvip, and in Navadvip he wandered around, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was Nimai Pandit at that time, meaning he was in the role of being a puffed up scholar, and so he saw him. He saw, and he immediately bowed down and offered obeisances, even though he was still disguised. And then after that, he gave up his disguise. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu invited him for lunch, and he came to the house of Jagannath Mishra. Of course, Jagannath Mishra was not there. And Shachi Mata cooked very wonderful prasadam, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they took prasadam together. Of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu realized that he was a disciple of Madhavendra Puri, and therefore he didn't want to take with him. But somehow or another, Isvara Puri convinced him to take. And then they spoke, and Isvara Puri decided, he couldn't understand who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was, but he understood he was such a great person. He was immediately attracted. And so he decided to stay in Navadvip for a few months. And he stayed at the house of Gopinath Acharya. And Gopinath Acharya is very famous for revealing the Lord. But even Gopinath Acharya at that time didn't know who Nimai Pandit was, that he was the Lord. So Isvara Puri, Gadadhar was a young boy, and of course Nimai Pandit was young, but Gadadhar was younger, and Gadadhar was very immediately. Isvara Puri could see that he was very wonderful personality, so he began to recite his book, Krishna Lilamrita, and Gadadhar was in ecstasy. And then Nimai would come and visit him every day, almost every day, and he would sit and listen, and Isvara Puri would recite his Krishna Lilamrita. But then he said to Nimai, "You are a great scholar. Therefore, please detect any faults that may be in my book." And immediately, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, anyone who thinks that there is any fault in the book of a pure devotee is the greatest sinner. He said, even if there is some fault, then that fault should be understood to be manifestation of the absolute truth. Who could ever find faults in anything you say? Just like Srila Prabhupada chose it to be the preface of the Bhagavatam, Tad Visargo Janatagya Viplavo, that Yasmin, what is it? Yasmin Abadyavat Api. namanyanantasya yashon kitaniyat vinanti gayanti anti sadavaha. That this Bhagavatam, even if there is some faulty grammar, that that should be understood to be negligent, and one should understand the essence. And who can understand this essence? Shrinyanti vinanti gayanti sadava. A person who is thoroughly honest. Thoroughly honest doesn't mean somebody who doesn't steal, or tell a lie. It means somebody who thoroughly understands the absolute truth. And so, but then he insisted. And so one day, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, well, actually, there is one fault, one verb, that you have it as a atmanipi verb, but it's actually a paras my padi. And then Isvara Puri studied it and analyzed it. He said, actually, I want to leave it as it is. And immediately Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, he never tried to correct him again. Even though there were grammatical faults, showing that whatever the spirit, just like we sing, Guru Mukha Patyabhakya Chitete Koriya Aikya, whatever comes from the mouth of the spiritual master, that is the composition of my consciousness. That is what I am made of. And so he gave many lessons in the life of Isvara Puri. And then they met so many more times, and then due to his restless nature, he left. So then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is that mentioned here? So anyway, I'll read just the rest of this purport. To teach others by example how to be a faithful disciple of one's spiritual master, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, visited the birthplace of Isvara Puri at Kumarahata and collected some earth from his birth site. He kept very carefully, and he used to eat a small portion of it daily. This is stated in Chaitanya Bhagavat Adi Lila chapter 17. It has now become customary for devotees, following the example of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to go there and collect some earth from that place. So, yes, actually, one devotee, I never went there, but one devotee who went there, he said there's a big hole. There's a big hole where everybody goes, and over the centuries, following in the footsteps of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is taking dust. So they had to, keep people. Some people were taking jars of dust, buckets of dust. So they had to pave it, and they left one place, and then they would have to bring dust from another part and put it in there because people kept taking it. Of course, that only happened really after the time, up to the time of Narottam Das Thakur, and after the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, because there was no Chaitanya Bhagavat or Chaitanya Charitamrita was not available. So after it became then, so now all of us can go to Srila Prabhupada's birthplace in Kolkata, and we can take some dust. But unfortunately, everything is paved. So I told the devotees they should excavate some dust and put it in little capsules, and then devotees can take it and take a few grains every day. So this shows the intensity of the love of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, giving this example, how sacred is the spiritual master. So then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he decided to reveal his Sankirtan pastimes. He went to Gaya. And when he arrived and he saw the footprints of the Lord, tears were coming from his eyes, and the Brahmins could not believe. Who is this person? But he contained himself to some degree because he wanted to show something very important. So then, while he was there, he saw Madhavendra Puri entering into the temple. And he immediately went and offered obeisances, and Isvara Puri offered obeisances to him. They spoke and they embraced, and tears were coming from each other's eyes. This is very famous. When great personalities leave, they bathe each other with their tears. Not that they're wanting to bathe the other person, but you can't help it. Actually, from an ordinary person, anything that exudes from the body is considered to be like stool and urine. But tears from the eyes of a pure devotee are considered to be nectar. So they separated. Then one Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was staying in one room, and he finished worshipping the lotus feet and doing all the Shraddha ceremony and everything. There was a purpose for this. Then Madhavendra Puri came to his room, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had just cooked, and he was cooked some rice and preparation. And Isvara Puri said, "Oh, it looks like I arrived at the right time." No, because he was still seeing Mahaprabhu as a great personality. So he was thinking, maybe I will get some remnants. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "Please, you sit down and eat." And he said, "Well, how will you eat?" "Oh, I will eat later." No, there's enough for two. No, please, if you want to please me, please, you sit down and eat. And while he was serving Madhavendra Puri, Ramadevi, Lakshmi, came and cooked another meal for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so after Isvara Puri he came, got his, and they sat and they ate. And they were in ecstasy speaking about Krishna. And in Chaitanya Bhagavat it says, anyone who hears this pastime of Isvara Puri taking the prasadam of Mahaprabhu will go back home, back to Godhead. So then a few days later, Isvara Puri came again, and he said, "Actually, I had a dream, and I can understand everything I've seen about you, all the characteristics. I can understand you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore I have come here to offer my respects." But then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "Actually, I request you to give me initiation." No. And he said, I am giving you my life. I am giving you everything I have. So something like a simple thing, some mantra, I certainly I will give you, although you are the spiritual master of the three worlds. But I will give, So he gave the 10-syllable mantra, the Gopal mantra, and then, so this was very significant because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was showing, I'm doing the Shraddha ceremony, I'm doing this for my forefathers. But as soon as he took initiation, he began chanting in ecstasy, and he would fall on the ground. And otherwise, he showed that until we actually get the mercy of the Vaishnavas, that we will simply be caught up in all kinds of different rules and regulations and formulas and religious activities. But when we get the mercy of being initiated with the proper mantra from a bona fide guru, then our whole life is transformed. And of course, later on, after that, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was in such ecstasy that the devotees were saying, now we have to go back. And he had a vision of Krishna. And then Krishna disappeared, and he started mad in ecstasy. "My Lord, my dear child Krishna, where have you gone?" Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was saying. And then the devotee said, now we have to go back to Navadvip. And he said, no, I'm going to Vrindavan. I saw Krishna and he left. and therefore I must go to Vrindavan and find him. But then a voice came from the sky and said, this is not the time. Later you will go to Vrindavan. Now you must go back to Navadvip and spread the holy name and the Sankirtan movement. So then he went back to Isvara Puri, and he begged Isvara Puri, please allow me to go back to Navadvip. Isvara Puri gave him permission. But then, of course, later on, as we see, after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took sannyas, then when he was explaining, because, Prakashananda Saraswati was saying, why do you chant and dance with these fanatics? Just like some people, especially Mayavadis, they also see us chanting and dancing, and they think we're a bunch of fanatics. But some, Mayavadis especially. But actually we're dancing and chanting, so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he came back to Isvara Puri. He explained this to Prakashananda. So he said, my dear Guru Maharaj, what kind of a mantra have you given me? That this, I've lost all my composure, all my knowledge, if you have knowledge, Shastra and Gyan, you're supposed to sit, practice yoga, meditate, and become very, very serious. But I can't be serious anymore. I'm just crying and dancing and chanting. I don't know what's going on. And then Isvara Puri smiled. And he said, you are very fortunate. The fruit of love of Godhead has immediately manifested in your heart. Generally, this takes some time. But in your case, no. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, my spiritual master told me, because he said he gave me two instructions. The first instruction was, Tumi murka tomara nahika vedanta adhikar. You are a fool. You have no ability to understand Vedanta. But Krishna nam japa sada e mantra sar. You just chant this name of Krishna always, 24 hours a day. This is the essence of all mantras. This was the first instruction. Then Isvara Puri explained to, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu knew, but he was explaining for our benefit, that the effects of chanting the Maha Mantra properly is that all symptoms of ecstasy will manifest in your body, and you will cry and dance and chant. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, my spiritual master recited one verse from Srimad Bhagavatam. And he said, this is the essence of the whole Bhagavatam, that hitam vrata swapriya namakirtya, that when one takes the serious vow that the holy name of Krishna will be the dearest thing to my heart, then jatanurago drutachitta uchchaye, then immediately ecstasy, symptoms of deep devotional attachment will cause the heart to melt. And then one will very loudly, asat yato roditi rauti, that one will smile, one will laugh, and one will cry in ecstasy, and spiritual agitation will overcome one's body. And then Gayat Yun Maravan Nriyati Lokabhyaha. And then, in great ecstasy, without caring about anyone else's opinion, and especially the opinion of worldly people, one will dance in mad ecstasy. And so, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, this is my spiritual master told me, this is the essence of the whole Bhagavatam, that you have to take the name of Krishna. the glorification of Krishna into your heart. No. So, this was Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showing us that the orders and the instructions of the spiritual master are the very essence, no, the the very essence of one existence. Vichari kichu nahi pai tomara karuna sara, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, that the instructions of the spiritual master are the very essence of my existence. And this is how we should understand. So this whole pastime of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Isvara Puri is meant to instruct us that how to become pure devotees of Krishna, how to give our life and become ecstatic in devotional service, and how to serve the spiritual master and understand that my life is simply meant to satisfy the desires of Shri Guru and Gauranga. No. So, these are some thoughts on this wonderful day of the disappearance of Sri Isvara Puri. So, I'll stop here. Any comment or question? Microphone. We need a microphone duty.
Dhanapram Maharaj, thank you very much for these wonderful lessons that how the essence of life is to become pure by following the instructions and pleasing the spiritual master. My question, Maharaj, is done a little bit of research. I couldn't really find exactly what is the Swarupa of Isvara Puri. So somebody said that he's like, just like Madhavendra Puri is a Kalpavriksha from the spiritual world. In one of the lectures, somebody said that Isvara Puri is a seed of that Kalpavriksha or the root of that Kalpavriksha. I'm not very clear. So if you could enlighten us on that, and therefore see how it is in connection to Madhavendra Puri, the ecstatic symptoms that Isvara Puri himself demonstrated. So is there any understanding that we can get from the scriptures?
Yeah. The understanding that he was the fructification of the seed, which means that the seed is planted in the heart, as bhakti lata. And when it fructifies by our surrender, so he was showing complete surrender to the spiritual master. And therefore, the bhakti lata fructified and grew from Isvara Puri. And of course, by the arrangement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then by his giving initiation to Mahaprabhu, the tree of transcendental devotional service was, it's externally planted in the heart of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he manifested that tree. And the two main branches, who remembers the two main branches? This is an easy one. Nityananda and Advaita, two main branches. And all the other branches come out from there. So this is how we should receive the mercy of the spiritual master. He plants the seed. So by planting the seed, what does that mean? It means that we have the duty to take the instructions of the spiritual master and make them our very life and soul. And this is the fructification of the seed. If we don't do that, then the seed, if the seed doesn't fructify, then we will just externally obey, but we will have our own agenda. And so the fructification of the seed means that I accept the mercy of Shri Guru and I make that my life and soul.
Thank you much. With your permission, just one more point.
Yes.
Which is about Ramachandra Puri. They say that he is a senior god brother. Between him and Isvara Puri, it's a little bewildering that somebody who is actually, Madhavendra Puri was directly in Krishna consciousness. He was always in ecstasy. How is it that Ramachandra Puri would actually ask him to meditate on the Brahman? Because he would also be, although initiated externally from Shankara Sampradaya, it is expected that he would also be practicing devotional service.
He joined, but his heart was never softened. No. But this is also the arrangement of the Lord to show this. Just like, some personalities, they take, just like Jai and Vijay, to illustrate something, these devotees, they become demons. So to illustrate something, it's very difficult for anyone to be in the association of Madhavendra Puri and not, but sometimes these examples are there. Just like Krishna Das was in the association of Mahaprabhu, but he became bewildered. So this is an example to show, even if we're engaged in devotional service, even if we're worshiping the deity, if our consciousness is not proper, then it'll just all be external, some mechanical thing that I'm doing, but my heart has not become softened by chanting, by hearing, by remembering, by obeying.
Thank you, Maharaj. Grateful.
Anyone else?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for this wonderful class. I just want to understand, normally it is said that if Guru rejects a living entity, then that living entity does not have any hope. If Krishna rejects, then there is a hope that the devotee can save. But for the case of Ramchandra Puri, his spiritual master rejects him. But normally spiritual master is a very merciful, so much merciful, even though disciple commits some offense, offenses, the spiritual master forgives. But here we are seeing that Madhavendra Puri, being a very merciful spiritual master, also he says that you go away.
Yeah.
So what kind of what we should learn from this?
Very unfortunate. Actually, Srila Prabhupada, as far as we know, only rejected 3 people. And why did he reject them? Because they began to challenge him. 2 of them came to Prabhupada and said, "We want your blessings so that we can get higher teachings." And Prabhupada said, "I give you the blessing to enjoy the material world." And that's what happened. And the other one, just it was Prabhupada's one of his Sanskrit editors. And so he began to tell devotees that actually there's something much beyond what Prabhupada is giving us. And when Prabhupada heard about that, he said that this man has become a black snake. And do not listen to his poison. And so, but other than that, many people had many difficulties. But Prabhupada, even one devotee sold the temple and kept the money. That's pretty serious. And but Prabhupada was a little angry. He was angry, and at first he said, "No, that this is very wrong. We should take legal action." But next day, Prabhupada said, "No, he is a devotee. He does not understand." And then a year later, Prabhupada said, "Where is Gaurasundar? Please bring him to me." And when he came, he said, "I'm so happy to see you." So, because this was lust, but it wasn't. He never doubted Prabhupada. He just became greedy and had some material desire. So Prabhupada was very merciful, even if someone was fallen. But if they gave up Srila Prabhupada's shelter, and actually doubted Srila Prabhupada, then the spiritual master must reject them. Must reject, because otherwise they will poison others with that very, very improper mentality. Okay, so we can stop here. Thank you all very much for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki, Sripad Isvara Puri ki. Nitai Gaura Premanandi Nantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Prabhupada ki jai.